place, like a new city. Why is this city here? If you look into the history of cities, there is usually originally it was a geographical reason that a city sprung up in a place, right? For instance, if there's no water source, you're probably not going to have a city, right? So originally it was more geographical, topographical, that kind of thing. Then technology became an issue. Where did the railroad go? That has a lot to do with some cities surviving and some cities not surviving, right? And then the same thing happened when the interstates came through, right? So every abiding place, every time you have a civilization, every time you have a, quote, way of life, it's legitimate to ask, why is this here rather than somewhere else? Do you understand the gist of what I'm getting at? Why is this here? And I find that interesting because I love history and I love that kind of thing. But you know what? It has some real significance for us in other ways as well. Today, we're going to be looking at a story in the book of 1 Chronicles. So you may want to start finding that in your Bibles in case you hadn't been there recently. We're going to be looking at in a crucial moment in the life of King David, the king of all Israel. At this time, he's been king both of the northern kingdom, the northern tribes, southern tribes and the northern tribes for some period of time. All of his enemies have been put down around him in immediately previous things. Even the leftover Philistine giants have been put down, kind of the last enemies of the land. And we find David in this story in actually one of his, not one of his finest hours, but one of his least fine hours. It's one of the times where David, as my grandmother would have said, really split his britches with the Lord. He made one of the biggest mistakes he ever made in his role as king, leader, representative of God's people. And we're going to pick that story up, and we're going to be looking at that story to see how this story is a shadow of the story we're living in through Christ, okay? So, let me tell you a little bit of it, and then I'm going to read to you some of it. So David has gotten to a place where his enemies have been pretty well set down around him and put down around him. And David gets a bee in his bonnet that he needs to do a census throughout all the tribes. And basically his purpose of doing the census is to find out how many warriors he has. And this census greatly displeases God. Now the story, the text where this story is actually found in two places. We're going to read it in 1 Chronicles 21. It's also found in 2 Samuel 24. We're going to read the Chronicles version of the story. But we're not told in this story why God was so displeased. We are told that when David called the commander of his army in, Joab, and said, now Joab, I'm giving you a job. Your job is to take some fellas with you and to go throughout all the land and go to every tribe, every tribal area, and count up the number of able-bodied warriors that we have. Now Joab is the general of his army. What would you expect Joab to say? Great idea, boss. I've been wondering why you didn't do this a long time ago. But do you know what Joab said instead? Bad idea, boss. Why would you do this? He says, David, King David, I hope God multiplies the number of your warriors many times over and you live to see it. but don't do this census. Now, the only clue we have as to why Joab would have said that and why God would have been so displeased is that there are instructions in the book of Exodus about how to take a census and why to take a census. And let's just say, for the sake of saving time, knowing how many wars you have was not the right why, and sending out your general as the head of the census is not the right how. Okay? You can find the text in Exodus and read it later if you want. But for the sake of time, that's all I'll tell you. So we do have some indication in other parts of Scripture why this would have displeased God so. But it is immediate. Now,